Hello, I'm Jerry Fort. I'm going to read a story from this book here called The Scary States of America 50 Weird and Terrifying Stories, one from each state based on true events by Michael Teitelbaum. And I picked one here from Maine to do because I thought it sounded kind of interesting. Haunted Movie Theater. Okay, so it says here, my parents' idea of a fun time on vacation is visiting every single gallery and boutique in town. When we visited Portland, Maine, I begged them to let me hang out in town solo. There were a ton of comic book stores I wanted to check out, plus I was dying to see a movie. Okay, dying to see a movie might not be the best expression to use before telling this story. I first noticed the weird woman across the aisle from me in the old Strand Theater while I was checking out the amazing mural painted on the theater's wall. It depicted scenes from the early part of the 20th century in a New England town, which I guess could have been Portland itself. I imagined myself traveling back in time and walking around the old town. After a few minutes, I came back to my senses. That's when I saw the woman. She looked to be 20 or 30 years old, and she was dressed in the clothing of the period shown in the mural. She wore a long black dress, high boots, and a ruffled blouse that buttoned up to her neck. Her hair was wrapped in a tight bun on top of her head. It was kind of eerie, like she had just stepped out of the painting on the wall. I know I have an active imagination, and the idea of someone stepping out of a painting is a little silly. Still, there was something odd about her. It's Portland, you know, she said softly. Who was she talking to? I glanced over my shoulder. There were only a handful of people in the theater, and nobody else seemed to notice her. I turned back, and she was staring right at me. Excuse me, I said. The mural, she said softly. It's Portland, about 100 years ago. She'd obviously noticed me observing the painting. Thanks, I said. I can be pretty bold, but I stopped myself from asking why she was wearing weird clothes. Not everything strange is supernatural. Some people are just crazy. Would you like to see it? She asked. Portland, 100 years ago, I mean. Well, that explains the clothing, I thought. This woman is nuts. How would we do that? I asked as politely as I could. The movie set, she replied. Haven't you seen it? I shook my head. Just a few blocks from here is a recreation of Portland from the early 20th century, she explained, for the film. Now it made sense. They were shooting a film here that was set in the town 100 years ago, and she was an actor playing a role in the movie. Sure, I said, thinking that a tour of a movie set with one of the actors would be pretty cool. My name is Gertrude Watts, the woman said as we left the theater and stepped out into the bright sunshine. Jason Spector, I said, shaking her hand. I'm not from around here. I could tell, she said, smiling. She led me to the end of Hancock Street. We turned the corner, and I could hardly believe my eyes. It was like stepping back in time. An amazing recreation of the town of Portland 100 years ago stretched out before us. We walked past a general store, a barbershop, a bank, and a hotel before coming to a stop in front of the Hancock Tavern. Take a look, Gertrude said. Using my sleeve to wipe the dust off the window, I peered inside. The place was a scene of loud, bustling activity. A piano player in a red striped shirt and with a handlebar mustache played a lively rag. Waitresses carrying trays full of beer hurried past tables filled with poker players smoking big cigars. The bar was packed. A haze of smoke hung over the sawdust-covered floor, and the crowd seemed to be having a great time. Very cool, I said, impressed by the attention to every detail. They must be filming right now, huh? I guess you're not in the scene. Gertrude smiled, and we continued down the street. In the dry goods store, a woman dressed in the same style as Gertrude bought a bolt of fabric. A man in the hardware store, wearing an old-time suit, bought a long, wooden-handled shovel. At the end of the block, the stable was filled with horses. "This is pretty amazing," I said, watching a blacksmith put a shoe on one of the horses. "I never saw a movie being filmed before." The tour ended and Gertrude headed back toward the theater. I walked beside her. "When do you shoot your scenes?" I asked. "Oh, my scenes are all finished," she replied. "I've given my last performance." Again, I was embarrassed to ask her why she still had her costume on if she was finished filming. When we reached the Strand, Gertrude smiled, waved, and then stepped back into the theater. "Thanks," I called out as she disappeared into the darkened building. "That was fun." I turned to a man standing outside the theater. "I just got a tour of the movie set," I told him. "They did an awesome job. Do you know when they'll be done filming?" The man looked at me strangely. "They finished filming here five years ago," he said. We just left the set up as a tourist attraction." "Oh, so now you hire actors to dress up and give tours and act out the roles of people in the old time town and stuff?" I asked. "No," he replied. "There's no one in the old town. It's just a set." "Well, what about Gertrude?" I asked, growing curious and a little concerned. "Gertrude? Do you mean Gertrude Watts?" he asked. "Yeah, exactly," I replied. "She just gave me a tour of the movie set, and the place was wild. There were people all over the set in costumes acting out scenes." The man smiled to himself and shook his head. "Son, you did get to experience something pretty cool. Now, let's see. Son, you did get to experience something pretty cool. Now, don't be scared, but Gertrude Watts was my great-great-grandmother," the man explained. "She was an actress who performed here at the Strand 100 years ago, back when they did live plays. During a performance, a stage light fell on her and killed her. Her ghost has been haunting the Strand ever since." Huh. So he knew about her ghost, huh? I dashed inside the theater and looked around, but saw no sign of Gertrude. "Oh, you won't find her," the man said when I hurried back outside. "She finds you." I ran back to the movie set, my mind racing and my paranormal sensors on overload. Pulling open the door of the Hancock Tavern, I stepped inside, only there was no one inside. No poker players, no waitresses, no sawdust, not even on the floor. The front of the tavern was just a wooden flat supported by braces. I stepped through and found myself looking at the back of a modern building just behind the set. Apparently, the man at the Strand was right. Gertrude Watts had found me and showed me a glimpse of the world she had lived in 100 years ago. As weird and freaky as the whole experience was, it sure beat hanging out with my parents. All right, there you go. Pretty wild. So if you're into these kind of books of the paranormal, you collect them or you collect paranormal type stuff, get you one of these books. It's filled with all kinds of different experiences people have had, and they're telling their stories in here. You might enjoy having this in your collection. Michael Teitelbaum, Scary States of America. Check it out. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. See you on the next one. Bye.